Let's check in with how the genuine left is doing these days. Oh, it turns out they're shitting on teachers' unions.
Workers. That's very pro-labor.
You know,
Dory Lightfoot.
Here is Jimmy Dore railing against the Chicago Teachers Union. As you know, for the first week back from school, the teachers union wanted to have safe protocols as to how them going to school, perhaps have a remote option. And the other day, their insistence on this, and then they were basically locked out of the schools by the Chicago school system. They came to an agreement, I think it was a day or two ago, where they basically just set up a metric system or metrics for when you would go remote. And so I want to clarify that because I got corrected by a listener, because yesterday I'd sort of characterized saying that they wanted the remote option. What they wanted, or at least what they settled for, was some metrics as to when that happens. Now, I am fully aware of the implications of remote learning. I have 2 children. I'm also fully aware of what the implications are of going to school when your teacher's out sick, your principal's out sick, when your fellow students, some of them will wear masks and some won't wear a mask. I have had to test my kids multiple times because they've had close contact with the few kids who did show up for school this past week.
And you're in an area in Brooklyn where people actually wear masks, let alone the rest of the country. And there's not much testing in some areas of this country as well.
Indeed. But here's Jimmy Dore really taking it out on the Chicago Teachers Union. And ostensibly, I guess, because this is what's going to play on Rumble. I'm not sure why.
But there's a big debate about whether they should open the schools because of COVID and because Omicron is so much more contagious. Omicron, the symptoms of Omicron are very mild, and they're like a cold. And a lot of people are saying that's good because that signals the end of the pandemic, because now we're going to become endemic and now it will just circulate. And the symptoms that it will present with are those of a cold, even though it's not, it's the Omicron cold. So everybody's shitting their pants about kids.
It'll be mild pretty much only if you are vaccinated and boosted, by the way.
And even then, not necessarily the case, but we do know that how many people died yesterday of the Omicron cold?
I have that written down. 1,736.
They died yesterday from the Omicron cold. We have record number of people hospitalized, record number of children hospitalized. We do know that the vast majority of people who die, even if they've been vaccinated, have comorbidities. But we have 1,700 people dying daily in the country right now of the Omicron cold.
And if you get a cold as a kid, you might be at a higher risk for diseases like diabetes, which they're finding out.
And we also know that 10 to 20%, at least prior to Omicron, we don't really know the details of Omicron because it's only been around literally for a month.
Yeah, but colds do the same kind of thing.
Well, can I just clarify? When he says Omicron cold, do we know he doesn't know Greek, and Omicron is Greek for strains, health systems, and education systems?
This is just it's hard to know how much stupidity is involved in this, or just sheer recklessness and just sort of just sort of vanity.
It's the why not
greed.
both
He's all in.
meme.
His chips are all in it.
But it could be both, right? Yeah. All right, but go back just a little bit.
And the symptoms that it will present with are those of a cold, even though it's not, it's the Omicron cold. So everybody's shitting their pants about kids having to go to school are just repeating propaganda from big pharma funded establishment news. Congratulations. Do you know the damage?
Pause it for 1 second.
That is done to kids?
Let's just look up when we're not seeing an increase in kids in the ICU. Because I don't know when that was written that he's putting up there. But here, this is just unbelievable. Child COVID hospitalizations are up, especially in 5 states. This is the same article that he took that from. Is he doing this again? Is he doing this again? Go back. Put this up. Because if he's doing this again, it's un-effing believable. Because I thought he fired that.
Did he rehire that guy?
Yeah.
Did he rehire? Go back a little bit. But I want you to play that clip of Jimmy. And then I want you to just look at that link I just sent you. Now, we don't know when he pulled that from because he doesn't cite it. It says NBC News there. Go right there. Keep the screen up on that clip that he had. And we test anybody who's admitted to the hospital, whatever reason, to see whether or not they have COVID. And we're definitely seeing an increase in cases. However, we're really not seeing an increase in children who are hospitalized for COVID.
Yes,
or
that's
in the intensive
Dr.
care.
Paul Offit. He's quoting here. I just found it in the article. Vaccine expert at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia.
Okay, now pop up the link I just sent you.
That does seem like it is a direct quote from the article.
Okay, and at the same time, but the states, okay, go back up, scroll up.
It's down here.
Okay.
We test anybody who's admitted to the hospital for whatever reason.
We're definitely seeing an increase in case. We're not really seeing an increase in children who are hospitalized for COVID or in the intensive care unit for now. When was this? December 28th. We are now 2 weeks out from that, and we look at the hospitalizations of children, and it's up. And it's child hospitalizations are up is the title of the piece. Then he pulls the one quote where they didn't see this. But we know that this is up. So he pulls literally the one quote from the piece.
And the guy works in Philadelphia. This is a discussion from, I would imagine that this is a national data. The number of kids hospitalized with COVID has more than doubled in 10 states, as well as Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico, according to the analysis.
But in Philadelphia, they're not seeing it. And so that's the one that he's going to highlight. In New York, we're seeing it. In New Jersey, in Ohio, Florida, Illinois, but on December 28th, we didn't see it in Philadelphia. So that's the quote I'm going to pick from the story. Do you like what kind of scum would do this? But let's continue to watch that kind of scum.
Because he attacks workers here too.
That wasn't even the thing.
And now I can't wait for him to tell us about kids.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. He doesn't have kids, as far as I know.
No, he doesn't have kids.
But he cares about them more than any.
He cares about the children.
Oh, this is the healthcare guy, too.
He cares about the children.
He wants Medicare for all. Don't you understand?
Good.
It's the Omicron cold. So everybody's shitting their pants about kids having to go to school are just repeating propaganda from big pharma-funded establishment news. Congratulations. Do you know the damage?
Pause it. Keep it up. He is quoting one quote from an establishment news source, NBC News, that reported in Philadelphia they're not seeing a rise in pediatric cases, despite the fact that news article he pulls from says that in 5 states they are seeing a pediatric rise. But it's the establishment news that's being paid off to not provide this.
Yeah.
I mean, but continue.
Congratulations. Do you know the damage that is done to kids not being socialized in schools? We don't even know.
Right.
But it's great. And the Chicago Public Schools Teacher Union are so fear-mongered, they just voted to end in-school, in-person.
Look at the date on that.
July 19th, 2020.
Updated on July 20th, 2020.
Look at the date on
Fucking
that.
psycho.
What a psycho. What a psycho. We know that we have broken pediatric hospitalization records for COVID during this Omicron wave. And I say this as someone who's sending my kids to school despite this going on. But to go out there and pretend that this is not an issue is just sheer lying. Continue.
This union fearmonger.
Yes, here we go.
Oh, yeah, but here's the kicker.
Maybe
right?
they're fearmongered into thinking they need a union in the first place.
School. They are at a higher risk of contracting the Omicron cold. Yes. Yeah. They are at a less risk for severe disease. So what you're saying is we're using the word risk now to describe the symptoms of a cold. So kids are at greater risk of catching something that will present as a cold.
Top 5 Zoe reported symptoms. So this is the early London data, right? Most common, runny nose. Second most common, headache. Third most common, fatigue. Sometimes the fatigue was bad, sometimes it was mild. Fourth most common feature, sneezing. Fifth most common feature, sore throat. The implication is obvious. If you have any of these and you've had colds in the past, you're going to think it's a cold, but it may well not be. It may be a Omicron cold. Need to get tested.
So there you have it. That's what people are locking down to avoid that.
Who's locking down?
Yeah.
They think it's to avoid something more deadly. They're misinformed. Why? Because they're getting their information from the establishment. I'll tell you what I think. We should keep them open and kids should be going to schools.
Interesting. So, I mean, he doesn't want to, he let it slip earlier where he railed against the union. He was like the Chicago Teachers Union. Then he kind of has to backtrack and doesn't want to go full, full anti-union in his rant there. But this is the guy that's pro-worker and pro-labor and pro-working man, right? Because for a guy like Jimmy, a worker, a member of a union, is only when you Google coal mine worker or cop that looked like my dad or just regular old white guy, basically, that I knew growing up. And that's the kind of person that I want to protect. That's part of why he's able to, so flippantly feed into racism and sexism towards people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez or Ilhan Omar or whatever when he attacks the squad, is because his perception of who he wants to represent is pretty much just like a white guy. And so he doesn't see Chicago teachers, the Chicago Teachers Union, as workers. And neither does his audience.
Let's see if we can get that part of the where he specifically mentions the union stuff. But the bottom line is nothing of what he's saying. Does he have an absolute a clue whatsoever of what he's referring to? But in fact, the reality is no one does at this point in terms of the long term. The only thing we know is that we're at peak pediatric hospitalizations in terms of Omicron. We don't know if that means that kids are subjected to long COVID in the way that people are from Delta.
Guess we'll just hope not.
Maybe. But figures. But Jimmy apparently understands the long-term socialization implications of being out of school for the first 2 weeks to January. Right? I mean, somehow a lot of the private schools were able to do this. A lot of the private schools, that's what they did.
Lori Lightfoot's they're doing all their stuff distance. Not like she's having in-person meetings.
And if it was such an issue, why did Chicago close the schools? Why did Chicago decide to lock out the teachers? I mean, give me a break. This is just it's demented.
I like the pose, though, that they're like they're anti-pharma and anti the establishment. Dude, you are agreeing with Nate Silver, Lori Lightfoot, Peter Ducey, Joe Biden, Jen Psaki.
Yeah.
That's what you guys are supporting right now. You're supporting, and look at this American Institute for Economic Research. They said that actually the shutdowns are bad for the most vulnerable. Nah, this is all bullshit. This is all bullshit.
Unbelievable. I mean, it's one thing to say we need to get support for parents in this instance, but you cannot get that support unless you acknowledge that there is a reason why students might come in. And the fact of the matter is that all the parents. Now, I grant you, this is from the Wall Street Journal, and it's not from, whatever, some rinky-dink website that says something else. Schools see a big drop in attendance as students stay away, citing COVID-19. Public school attendance has dropped to unusually low levels, complicating efforts to keep schools open. New York City saw its overall attendance rate fall below 70% when classes, I mean, I can tell you, there was less than half the kids in my son's class.
Were they fear-mongered home?
Apparently, these parents have no idea what their kids need. In Boston public schools, student attendance hovered around 70% since winter break, down from 90% before the holidays. Those parents in Boston also have no idea what they're doing. Chicago, 2/3 of public school students were present January 3rd, rising to 72% the next day. Attendance was 85% during the last week of school before winter break, and historically has been above 90%. So you had parents who had taken their kids out because they were afraid of getting COVID before they went and visited people. That's what's going on there. All these parents have no idea what they're doing about their kids, but Jimmy does. And everybody who's concerned about COVID is worried about catching a cold because they're not willing to let their kids be the guinea pig as to whether they'll get long COVID or whether they'll bring it home and get somebody else who will get long COVID.
And that the question you asked, who's locking down? The only proper noun that was in that clip was the Chicago teachers. And then the exact same day that Jen Psaki and all these people are going with Chicago teachers, that's what Jimmy thought he needed to emphasize.
Yep. Unbelievable. All right, let's read some IMs and let's get out of here. Big Dick Cheney. Romney is absolutely going to vote for Trump in 2024, even though Trump supporters would have beaten him to death had they found him on January 6th. Dalton's, Juul helped me transition from cigarettes. Weaker vapes helped me quit the Juul and quit nicotine altogether. That was, I didn't use Juul, but that was sort of my experience too on some level. Sam Stones, ask her about the conspiracy theory that vape lung was trial run of COVID. Laugh my ass off. Left of the box, a boot, my IM from last Friday, Toke. From Toke, pronounced toque, is what Canadians call beanies. You're practically bilingual now. Left is best. I couldn't understand half that anyways. Justin, are there any studies about long COVID with a vax? I think we answered that question. Ambica J, there are also rules, regulations for driving and a general understanding that you won't drive after drinking because there's no consensus that drunk driving sucks. There's no consensus for COVID. Anti-Senstrata. There's been a lot of talk about the human cost of China's zero COVID strategy. While politically impossible in America, do you think that there could be another way to end the pandemic? I don't know. I don't know. I mean, we have talks with epidemiologists, and these are people who spent their whole entire lives studying this stuff. People who worked on Ebola, people who worked on, the bird flu, people who worked on HIV. And there's only so much information that we have. And the question is like, how do you approach, you're in an area where there are, cliffs and it's dark out. Do you start jogging around or do you walk carefully? I mean, that's basically what it is. Like, we just don't know. And so you are cautious because we do know that some people are getting very sick.